Good evening, Mary Lou. Good to see you. I hope all is well. Let's see who else we're going to have joining us this evening. Last couple of weeks we've had of participating, which is wonderful. And I'm looking forward to this evening. It is, as I said in the email that went out to everyone, this is one of my favorite passages in the Hebrew scriptures. And I'll share a little bit more about that as we get into the Bible study. Hi, Tom. Good to see you as well. I'm sitting here in my office with 2 floor heaters going. When they built this office area, they put it on a cement slab, so it's cold all the time. Hello, Leslie. Welcome. Glad you were with us. Why don't we begin with a word of prayer, and others will catch up as they log on. Good and gracious God, we give thanks to you for every breath that we take, for every beat of our hearts, for we know that life truly is an amazing gift. And it is good every now and then to stop and ponder how precious that. Lord God, as we continue our journey through this life, we know that you are with us, and we seek to continue to grow in wisdom, that we might find the wisdom and the grace that we need for the living of these days. So we ask you to be present in our speaking, but even more so in our listening. We ask it as disciples of the risen Christ. Amen. All righty. Hi, Charlene. Good to see you. So this evening, we are looking at the ending to the Pentateuch. Pentateuch is Greek for the 5 books, the first 5 books of the Old Testament of the Hebrew Scriptures. And they are Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. As I said, they're sometimes referred to as the Pentateuch. They are also referred to by Jews as the Torah. And they are sometimes also called the 5 books of Moses. The reason being that among some people of the Jewish faith, the belief is that these 5 books were all written by Moses. We know that that is very unlikely. There are parts that clearly reflect a period of time after Moses. There's what is known as the strand theory. And what biblical scholars basically know is that the 5 books of Moses were originally in oral form, passed down from generation to generation as a spoken word, and then eventually written down. Well, the strand theory says that there were actually 4 oral traditions, and they were eventually all written down and then edited together. And the editing sometimes overlaps and reflects different oral traditions. So, for example, if I were to say to you, where did Moses receive the 10 commandments? Most of you would probably say on Mount Sinai. However, if you go to Deuteronomy, you will find there that Moses received the 10 commandments on Mount Horeb. Horeb. So it leaves you with the awkward possibility that Moses climbed two different mountains to get something which doesn't make sense. Well, what we know is that Horeb and Sinai are the same mountain. It's just the different oral traditions had a different name for the mountain. And it's also why you find the Ten Commandments in two different parts of the Pentateuch or the Torah, Exodus and Deuteronomy. It's also why there are two creation stories in Genesis. It's because of these different oral traditions that were written down and then edited together. In one story of creation, you have the Adam and Eve and the forbidden fruit and the serpent. And in the other, you have on the first day, second day, and on the seventh day, God rested. So the 5 books of Moses most likely were not written by him. Some portions might have been. So what we're looking at tonight is the very end of the Pentateuch. Moses has led the Israelites out of Egypt. They've wandered around in the wilderness for 40 years. And now they are on the verge of crossing over the Jordan River and entering the promised land. But Moses knows that he's not going to enter the promised land. And that's where we pick up the story. And this is what
Deuteronomy 34. Moses went up from the plains of Moab, Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land, Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the Negeb, and the plain, that is, the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. And the Lord said to him, This is the land of which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to your offspring. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not go over there. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor. But no one knows the place of his burial to this day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eye was undimmed, and his vigor unabated. And the people of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. Then the days of weeping and mourning for Moses were ended. And Joshua the son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands on him. So the people of Israel obeyed him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. And there has not arisen a prophet since in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. None like him, for all the signs and the wonders that the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh, and to all his servants, and to all his land, and for all the mighty power and all the great deeds of terror that Moses did in the sight of all Israel.
All righty, so questions, comments, and conundrums. Moses climbs Mount Nebo. He looks over into the promised land, and he knows that he's not going to set foot into the promised land. It's a very poignant moment, and I wonder what must have been going through Moses's mind as he stood there. He'd been through so much. He'd risked his life standing up to the Pharaoh, who at that time was the most powerful man on the face of the earth. He'd led the Israelites through the wilderness. He had to put up with their grumbling They complained about not having enough food to eat, and God gave them manna from heaven. Not having water, and God performed a miracle and brought forth water out of a rock at Meribah. They complained about just about everything under the sun, and Moses had to endure it. They accused Moses of trying to, or bringing them out into the wilderness deliberately to let them die. And so they'd gone through so much together. And here they are at the edge of what they've been working toward for all of those years. And Moses doesn't get to celebrate that crowning achievement. And gold star to anyone who knows why Moses was not allowed to go over into the promised land. And let's not kid ourselves here. Moses didn't die on Mount Nebo just because it was his time. Moses had been told long before they got to the promised land that he wasn't going to be allowed by God to go into the promised land. A lot of people think that's unfair. I don't particularly think it's unfair, and well, I don't want to usurp the gold star before somebody has a chance to answer, but Moses is not allowed to go into the promised land because of something that he did that was unfaithful. And so I wonder, how would you feel if you were Moses standing there on the top of that mountain? Would you be angry? Would you feel a little sorry for yourself? And if you read what is said in the passage, you don't get any hints as to what's going on in Moses's mind as he's dealing with all of this. That is correct, Tom. So the reason why Moses was not allowed to lead the people into the promised land is because of what happened at Meribah, out in the desert, the waters of Meribah. The people go to Moses, they're saying, we're dying of thirst here. What are you doing to us? You brought us out into this parched land to see us die. And Moses goes to God, and God says, take the rod that I have given you and strike the rock, and water will come forth from the rock. And there are two schools of thought as to why Moses displeased God. One is that he struck the rock twice. And the argument is that it showed a lack of faith in God. If he really believed in God, he would have only had to have struck the rock once. But I think the real reason is because when he struck the rock, he said, see what we, meaning Aaron, his brother, and I will do for you this day. So he doesn't give credit for the miracle to God. And because of that, God says, sorry, Moses, you don't get to go into the promised land now. And that bothers some people. And that's a whole other sermon. But basically what I would say is that God had to be hard on Moses here because it wasn't Moses who was going to get them to the promised land. It was God. And if people lost sight of that, there could have been ultimately chaos. And some of you have heard me tell this story before. for years, I would volunteer at a church camp up in Maine, and usually a college student. And the college students would try to be buddies with their campers. And we would say, you can't do that. You've got to set firm rules and let them know who's in charge right from the very beginning. Because if you don't, you're going to lose control of the cabin. And invariably, that's what would happen. And by Wednesday of that week, that cabin would be in a bit of chaos. In one year, it led to real tragedy. The kids in the cabin were horsing around, and there was one outside on the porch, and the rest were inside. And they wanted to keep the one on the porch from getting into the cabin. So as he was coming to the door, they rushed to close the door. He rushed to keep the door open. He put his hand up, and his hand went through a plate of glass. He got severe cuts, had to be rushed to the hospital. And I liken that to what was going on out there in the wilderness. God had to make it very clear that Moses wasn't in charge, that God wasn't their buddy, and that God was the one who was going to lead them to the promised land. And so I think that's why Moses had to come down hard on, God had to come down hard on Moses. So that's the reason why Moses isn't allowed to go into the promised land. And whether we think that's fair or not, we can debate that in another Bible study. But I've been thinking a lot about this passage because of everything that's going on right now. And I gave a sermon many years ago called The Sin of Sympathy. And basically what I said was that sometimes the worst thing you can do is show someone sympathy. Let me get, where's my glasses here? Again, I would agree with you, Tom, and say that God needed to make sure that the people understood that Moses wasn't leading them. Moses was God's servant, God's agent. So, as I look at the scene of Moses there on Mount Nebo, I kind of feel sorry for him. And maybe you do too. But there's nothing in the story that would indicate that that's how Moses was feeling. There's nothing in there. And hypothetically speaking, if Moses wrote the book, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and he wasn't happy with it, not being able to go into the promised land, then you'd think that he would say so. But I look at Moses there, and there's no sign of weeping or wailing or woe is me. And with everything that's going on right now, there's that temptation to feel sorry for ourselves. And I'm not saying it's wrong to feel sorry for ourselves. And I think it's normal, and that there are times when we all feel sorry for ourselves. But it can be dangerous. And I'm going to say in the sermon Sunday that feeling sorry for yourself is a little bit like sitting in a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. Oh, good point, Leslie. Yes, he does lay his hands on Joshua. And if Moses was feeling sorry for himself, it's not likely that he would have done that. So yes, that does seem to suggest that he accepts this as God's will. It's getting a little too warm in here. So, again, I think feeling sorry for ourselves is understandable, and there are times when we all do it, but it can be dangerous because it really doesn't accomplish anything. It doesn't solve a problem, and eventually it builds a wall between you and others who get tired of the woe is me routine. And it I look at Moses, and he could have been up there feeling sorry for himself, but the more I think about it, the more I see Moses as being, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Not congratulating himself, but feeling a sense of satisfaction. Okay? Feeling a sense of satisfaction that, yes, with God's help, he did stand up to the most powerful man on the face of the earth. And he did lead the Israelites through the wilderness for 40 years. And yes, he did get them to the edge of the promised land. And he could stand there knowing that they were in capable hands and that they would be entering the promised land. And so that's the other thing about self-pity, is it keeps you from appreciating the good that is all around you. And I just think that this story has so much to say to us today. And I'll tell you, I've been feeling sorry for others. So, for example, the seniors who graduated this year, they didn't get their senior prom. And I can't imagine what it must have been like for them not to be able to have this rite of passage, something that they look forward to for months. And so I guess the question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we not get stuck in the self-pity? No, he died there on Mount Nebo. I'll have to go back and check, but I believe that he died on Mount Nebo. Well, let me see here. I'm going back to the reading here. I'll have to do a little bit of research. I know that he dies. Yeah, it says, so Moses, the servant of the Lord, verse 5, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor, but no one knows the place of his burial to this day. That was the verse I was looking for. And so my understanding was that Moses dies there on Mount Nebo. And if you think about it, if Moses was still alive and the people knew that, would they have been able to turn and throw their allegiance fully behind Joshua? So my understanding has always been that Moses died there on Mount Nebo. And one of my favorite correlates, I invite you Google it. And actually, hold on, let me see if I can. Hold on there, let me see. Come on. Bear with me. All righty, here we go. This is, I'll play you a little bit of the anthem, Onward Ye Peoples. And this is specifically based upon the passage that we just read. And it is Moses urging the people to go on. Oh, wait, you know what? I'm going to do this one better. Only about a half a minute. I don't know about you, I get goosebumps every time I hear that. I love singing it. His eyes were undimmed. Yes, and you know, I look at this and actually I'm glad that I played that, because that anthem is the flip side of self-pity. Self-pity, you sit there and you don't do anything, and self-pity. Self-pity, you sit there and you don't do anything, and yourself. And you know, here in this, so that's I guess what I'm saying is the Moses I know isn't up there on the top of Mount Nebo feeling sorry for himself. The Moses that I know is up there on top of Mount Nebo proclaiming, onward ye people, strive for the light. And that's where our faith can come in. So our faith can rise us up out of the doldrums, out of the woe is me, out of the pity party, and say, God is still in heaven, and God is still able to lead us. And so I guess with everything that's going on with this pandemic, and I will confess there have been moments where I said, oh my gosh, are things ever going to be the same again? And I miss not being able to do this, and I think I've shared with some of you that one of my big concerns is, how do you celebrate Christmas Eve without being able to sing Christmas carols? And I get that thought in my head, and it just gets very heavy, and I think, oh, but we'll find a way to celebrate Christmas Eve. We will. And next year, we'll celebrate it the way we used to. Or maybe we'll celebrate it in new ways, that this is providing us an opportunity to learn how to maybe celebrate it a little differently, a way that is better. I'll give you an example. So I've done youth ministry. There are some Friday nights where do I really have to go over there? I'm not as young as I used to be. I don't have the energy. I used to be able to do 2 youth groups, one after another. And I'll come over here, and invariably by the end of the night, I'm energized. And, that's what our faith, probably 28 years or so, I always did youth group on Sunday night. Here, it just didn't work. And so Kate Mahoney and Lance Chapman were the advisors to the youth group at that time, the middle school youth group. And they came to me and they said, can we try something radical? And I said, sure, what is it? And they said, well, we're thinking of doing it on Friday night. And I said, worth a shot. And they did. The youth loved it. Parents loved it, because the kids weren't saying, oh, can you drive me over to the mall? And it worked. And eventually we got to the point where we could split our senior high off and become a separate group. And so I was going to work with the senior high. I sat down with them and I said, along with the other advisor, and I said, okay, so when do you want to meet? Thinking, Sunday night. And they said, no, we want to meet on Friday nights like we always have. And oh no, because I'd always taken Fridays off. When I started out, the senior minister took Monday off and said, you can take any other day of the week off that you want. So I went with Friday. And that's what I'd done for all of those years. And I think, oh no, this is going to screw everything up. And I was really feeling a little sorry for myself. And so we started meeting on Friday night, which meant that I had to change my day off. And so I changed my day off from Friday to Monday. And the change is wonderful, because now I go home on Sunday, whereas before I would work through Thursday night, have Friday off, and then Saturday morning I'd be over here getting ready for Sunday. And so, it's a different kind of self-pity, in the sense that I wanted to hold on to the way things were. And maybe that's part of what self-pity is a lot of times, is, things aren't the way they were or the way we want them. but that doesn't mean that they can't be something else and be even better. Yes, so in the anthem Onward Ye People, Salem is a reference for Jerusalem. And Salem is a variation on the Hebrew word shalom, which is peace, and the Arabic word salam, which is also peace. So, you know, self-pity is understandable. It's just God self-pity. And, you know, if anything, get angry. Angry is better than self-pity. Being angry at everything that's going on and saying, you know what? I am not going to let this defeat me. And actually, self-pity is basically surrendering, is basically saying, woe is me, and I give up. And so if I have a choice between feeling sorry for myself and saying, onward, you people, I think the faithful response when we're feeling sorry for ourselves is to say, okay, Lord, where do you want me to go with this? Help me to get angry about this so that I can not get stuck in that self-pity that does me and your will for me any good at all. Let me see here. Reflected in what the Israelites did. The Israelites could have been sucked into a lot of self-pity. Moses isn't there anymore. What are we going to do? You know, we'll never. But after the 120 days of mourning for Moses, they pick themselves up and they move on. And they move on with a new leader, someone they knew, but they've never known in this capacity. They don't know how it's all going to work out. But the one constant is God, God's grace. And that's something that I think is helpful to remember, is that, you know, God doesn't call us from yesterday. God calls us from tomorrow. And when we're stuck in our self-pity, we're focused on the way things are now or the way things used to be. Feeling sorry for yourself doesn't look at how things can be and how God will make them. And, you know, that's one of the things I keep saying to myself with all of this is, you know, am I thrilled with all of this new technology? And what used to be simple is now much more complicated, because once upon a time, I sent the Bible study out to everybody, and we sat down on Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, and we did the Bible study. Now I print the Bible study out, I send it to people, but I also have to set up a live stream. I also have to post on our Facebook page, inviting people to come. Same thing with the worship service. Used to be I'd give a worship service to Nadine, and she'd print it out, and on Sunday morning we'd all get here. And now, in addition to doing that, I have to put together a PowerPoint slideshow, because we can't have bulletins and hymnals and all of that. And I have to figure out which camera presets and what's going to look good on camera, what isn't going to look on camera. I have to set up the live stream. I have to post on Facebook. It is so much more complicated. And yet, there are real opportunities here. And so, you know, when I feel a little sorry for myself, I think, okay, but what's God doing here? God is taking this and God can transform it. But that's not going to happen if I get stuck in my self-pity. And that's feeling sorry for myself. And so, in order for God to transform and lead you to a better tomorrow, to lead you to that promised land, you can't get swallowed up in feeling sorry for yourself. And, you know, as I said, we've got a young couple that have started attending. They saw our live streams on the Sunday morning and like what they saw and they came. I know that there are people who have been watching us online, and I think that's wonderful. And so I think that there's some real possibilities, some real opportunities for us here. But in order to take advantage of them, we have to get angry, get disgusted, uh, anything but feel sorry for ourselves. And I'm not saying that a little feeling sorry for yourself isn't okay, because it is. We just need to make sure that we don't get caught in it, because there is a promised land out there. But in order for God to lead us to it, we have to be like Moses on the top of Mount Sinai and basically be saying, onward, you people. And Tom, I'm going to invite you to chime in here. I don't know, is there any other choir members who are with us tonight? But in the days of old, when we were worshiping with the choir here on Sunday morning, we'd always gather in Fellowship Hall before the service, and I would do a prayer. And what do I always say at the end of that prayer as the choir is getting ready to head down to the sanctuary? And as he's typing that, I hope he's still with us and he's going to type it. I will say that I got this saying from the senior minister that I started out with many moons ago up in South Portland, Reverend Dick Nordgren. He was a saintly pastor. There we go. Onward and upward. And that's who we are as a people. And, you know, you think about it, feeling sorry for yourself is basically backward and downward. But as a people of faith, we are called to go onward and upward. And I'd like to take over some more. If you have any, onward, you people. Yep. It is one of my favorite choir anthems. I have a lot of others, but this one is particularly near and dear to my heart, probably because I've always found this Moses on Mount Nebo passage so poignant. And I think that, that it's so appropriate with everything that's going on right now and everything that has been taken from us in various ways. Yes, it's also a great tune. So I thank you for joining me this evening, and if you have any further thoughts, please don't hesitate to. Um, it will be worth the trip on this coming Sunday. So thank you all for joining this evening, and I hold you in my heart and in my prayers. Stay safe and stay well.